technology, tourism, or agriculture, any investment in land creates a whole range of spillover benefits to fuel that cycle. For example, restoring 350 million hectares of degraded land by 2030 could generate up to $9 trillion in ecosystem services and sequester up to 26 gigatons of greenhouse gases. Nice numbers. But what do they actually mean for people around the world? For herders and on the rangelands of Jordan and Egypt, they mean reinstating traditional land management that stabilizes incomes and reduces conflicts. For tea growers in Vietnam, China, India, and Sri Lanka, they mean using natural fertilization and pest control to transform their plantations from red stumps to robust yields. For rice farmers in Madagascar, they mean swapping slash and burn monoculture for a basket of techniques that could see their crops diversify and grow by 40%. And for ranchers in the tropical Andes, they mean using pasture rotation, biogas, and water systems to improve the health of the meadows, the biodiversity, and the cattle, even doubling their milk production. What's more, all these projects have three things in common. First, women are equally involved in the decisions, implementation, and benefits, whether that's through greater financial security, stronger land rights, new skills, or simply not having to work for hours to get water. Second, those examples are all projects of the Global Environmental Facility that are being delivered through partnerships with governments, NGOs, scientists, local communities, and our sister agencies across the United Nations. And third, leveraging that inclusive and collaborative approach will see both the reach and the pace of change scaled up dramatically, especially if we can align them with some of the ambitious cooperation programs already taking root, such as the Initiative 2020 in Latin America and the Caribbean, the Great Green Wall of Africa, or the Green Belts of China and India, to name just a few. Ladies and gentlemen, combining our land with those three little concepts of equality, partnerships, and scale could take us a very long way towards our common goals. Just a year into this century, Kofi Annan's remarks acknowledged that we were already violently disabused of any hopes that progress towards global peace and prosperity is inevitable. When he asked us to confront it, we nodded, applauded, and carried on as before. So by the time that young girl he spoke of reached her teens, we had degraded over 1/5 of our land. Every minute in the world, I know that each one of you feels the same about someone, somewhere. That we all want to see them growing together in a world where every child has an equal chance, and that every investment in land will unlock opportunities to bring that world closer to reality. Which is why I also know we will ensure this COP makes global peace and prosperity more achievable, if not yet inevitable. Perhaps making it inevitable can be our challenge for next time. Bahut Denavad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your message and also reminding us that each one of us have a greater responsibility for someone, somewhere, and towards creating a planet and a growth which is more equitable and sustainable. Thank you so very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to request our next speaker, who earlier as the Environment Minister of Nigeria has played a very important role towards Nigeria's efforts on climate action and on sustainable development. Prior to this, she's also been the Special Advisor to the then Secretary General of United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, on the post-2015 development agenda, and she has been instrumental in bringing in the 2030 agenda for sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. Presently, ladies and gentlemen, she is in the most coveted position of the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations. It's my pleasure to be inviting and requesting Excellency Ms. Amina J. Mohammed to and the Sustainable Development Goals. Presently, ladies and gentlemen, she is in the most coveted position of the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations. It's my pleasure to be inviting and requesting Excellency Ms. Amina J. Mohammed to kindly address this august gathering.
Your Excellency Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Your Excellency Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, and special recognition to the young people who would be watching or who are in the audience. My deep appreciation to the Government of India for hosting this conference, and in particular to Prime Minister Modi for his vision and his leadership. To the Executive Secretary, my brother Ibrahim Tio, for the opportunity to highlight the unprecedented expectations on your work here. These times are not normal, and they are critical. And we need to start a massive effort to take the solutions that we are discussing here today to scale, to move beyond the negotiation and the planning to action and impact, individually and collectively at the country level. We've already used a third of our time frame to deliver on the 2030 agenda, and we've just 2 weeks to galvanize the urgent action ahead of the summits in New York. And we have the 3 inextricably linked Rio Conventions on land, biodiversity, and climate, which were created to trigger that action, but are still not reaching their full potential. The latest scientific data shows that the massive effort is painfully overdue. A quarter of our greenhouse gas emissions come from land degradation. 1 million species face extinction, threatening ecosystems that provide everything that we eat, we drink, and we breathe. And the lives of half of our people on this planet are affected by desertification, land degradation, and drought. What's worse is that the unhealthier our land becomes, the more dangerous the implications will be for all of us. So we can't really afford to ignore that the loss of land and ecosystem services shrinks GDP by 10% a year, nor can we ignore the increases of the likelihood of violent conflict or forced migration that affects mostly our women and our children. And those risks, with millions of people already feeling the effect, are spreading across the planet. From the dip in Germany's industrial output because drought hit the Rhine shipping last year, to the soil loss costing the United States up to $44 billion every year, from the forest fires of the Arctic or the Amazon, to the sandstorms and the droughts in the Middle East or the Sahel, and from the small island states and coastal communities that are fraying around the edges, to the Himalayan communities where women and girls spend more time collecting firewood than they did when this convention was born. Right across the planet, when the land suffers, so too do the people. Yet if we act with a sense of urgency and ambition, that the same land holds a credible number of solutions that we are all looking for. Solutions that will let people thrive, not just survive. And I believe everyone in this room and beyond is committed to that. To my mind, we can do 3 things to step up the ambition, speeds, and results of our action. First, let's try to move out of our silos, our individuality, that constrain us, and our ambition. Cooperation and action that delivers multiple benefits must be a priority for all of us. For example, we know that 820 million people are still going hungry, and that crop yields are dropping as demand for food is set to increase by 50% in the coming decades. Restoring 150 million hectares of farmland could feed 200 million more people every year. At the same time, it would provide greater resilience and over 30 billion a year in increased income for small stakeholders, and sink an additional 2 gigatons of carbon dioxide a year. Second, let's deploy and invest our resources wisely. A few days ago, the UN Global Compact and the Italian energy company Enel announced the first general purpose bond linked to the SDGs. It raised $1.5 billion. That means it was 3 times oversubscribed. It certainly signals a strong demand, and we should encourage more companies to follow suit. It is all great news until you realize that land degradation is costing us trillions of dollars every year and adding to the very emission problem the bond is trying to solve. We must make the investments in this land degradation, particularly in our low-income countries, to stop the preventable losses. If we restore the land, we put our investments into nature-based solutions that we know will work, that deliver for UNCCD, but also for the nationally determined contributions under the UNFCCC, and let nature and biodiversity flourish. The third, build more innovative partnerships to scale up the impact of individual and collective action. Look at the tea growers the Executive Secretary just mentioned. They are expanding restoration techniques. In India, over 500,000 tea workers are working with Trustia to transform their farms and their futures. In turn, Trustia is working with the GF, UN Environment, and the Rainforest Alliance to scale up impact across 4 countries and improve consumer choices around the world. While land restoration and increased yields are contributing to national commitments on poverty, biodiversity, and climate change, it's exactly the kind of homegrown, joined-up thinking that has allowed our host country to be one of the world's fastest-growing economies and still slash poverty by over 40%. It's a very concrete demonstration of why, if you act, you don't have to choose between social, economic, and environmental progress. In each of our communities and each of our countries, we can and we must have all of them in an integrated response to the challenges that we face today. And that's why I'm delighted that this COP is urging each party and each stakeholder to take bolder action on a much bigger scale. But it also aligns so closely with those 3 drivers to break down the silos, to invest wisely in sustainable management of resources and land restoration, and is building up the partnerships that will accelerate the urgency of the change that we need. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we no longer have the luxury of spending the next 10 years debating the targets. We have 2 weeks to move our common agenda in the right direction to bend the curve on a planet of less than 2 degrees towards action and impact. We can start with one opportunity, one child, Daphne, one woman, one man, one tea farmer, one business, one land restoration project. Then we scale it up, speed it up, join it up. It is in these critical times that our individual and collective responsibilities will be needed now, even more than they ever have been. It's a massive effort, but together we can lift and achieve the aspirations of the climate agenda. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your message and giving a clarion call to everyone that it is time to actually convert ideas into action and intent into impact. And even small steps are going to be making a huge difference. We need to come together, collaborate, and build partnerships. And now, ladies and gentlemen, inviting another world leader, the Honorable Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who's been the Prime Minister for more than 18 years, and he stands extremely passionate about realization of the Sustainable Development Goals and also the global environmental governance. He, ladies and gentlemen, is also an authority on the politics of climate change. I request Excellency Dr. Ralphie Gonsalves, the Honorable Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines, to address this August gathering.
Madam Chairperson, my dear friend, the distinguished Prime Minister of India, our sister Amina from the United Nations, our brother Ibrahim from the UNCCD, our Minister of the Environment and Climate Change from India, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I first of all would like to say how happy I am to be here in India. I also want to indicate, just in case you think that someone who is Prime Minister for 19 years runs some dictatorship, that we have elections every 5 years. And I've just been winning them. I want also to see if I can add some value to what has been said already. And accordingly, I want to adopt and call my own the speeches which have all been made here this morning. Very informative, very interesting, and very forward-looking speeches. And since I adopt all the speeches and call them my own, I should simply sit down. But I've come all the way from the Caribbean, so you expect me to say something a little more. Desertification has been authoritatively identified as the greatest environmental challenge of our time. And climate change is making it far worse. Both climatic variations and human activities have caused, engendered, or facilitated land degradation in arid, semi-arid, and dry subhumid areas, which in turn have resulted in extraordinary misery, human suffering, and extreme poverty. The veritable two horsemen of the apocalypse, land degradation and climate change, undoubtedly pose an existential threat to humanity, civilized life and living. The science in these respects definitively and unanswerably details the contours and more of this existential threat and its potentially dire consequences. Yet, the collective responses of nation states globally have not measured up adequately or sufficiently to the enormous tasks at hand so as to obviate disaster. Accordingly, this Conference of Parties, COP14, convened under the aegis of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, is a seminal staging post in humanity's quest for a better and sustainable condition of our lives, living, and production. I want to thank the Executive Secretary of UNCCD, my friend Ibrahim, for inviting me here, and who is doing a fantastic job. And we owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. India, glorious India, the home of a magnificent civilization of nobility, legitimacy, and authenticity, which strives for a better world for all humanity, and which now hosts this gathering of the convention's participants, provides the context, the backdrop, and wise leadership to frame COP14 as path-breaking, as epoch-making, in the arresting of land degradation, the sequestration of carbon, the rollback of global warming, and the slowdown and reversal of the ravages of anthropogenic climate change, in accord with at least the internationally agreed goals and targets. If we have come to India just to do the usual talking, I think we would have been not making the best use of our time. We heard the tremendous work which is being done in India by the government of Prime Minister Modi in relation to the issues under consideration at this conference. That we, each of us, individually and collectively, must resolve ahead of UNGA and all the assessments which were taking place. We must resolve to make this COP14 path-breaking and epoch-making. Each of us, we must reflect and come to that conclusion. And even if you have governments and organizations which are not as enthused as you may be, please be patient and be calm with them, but nevertheless prod them with urgency, because these times are perilous. The presence of our dear friend, the distinguished Prime Minister Modi, fortifies our hope that our future will not be desecrated, that our present will not become enveloped in a debilitating learned helplessness, inertia, and stasis. It is remarkable that India, the largest democracy in the world, works hand in hand with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is one of the smallest democracies in the world, and where some countries are inclined towards nativism and unilateralism, India reaches out. And in addition to what it is doing internally, it is making an important difference globally. And I want to thank Prime Minister Modi for his remarkable work in both respects. I just want to say this parenthetically. You're probably aware that St. Vincent and the Grenadines has become the smallest country ever to win the right at the General Assembly to sit on the Security Council, the United Nations. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for the tremendous support that India gave to our campaign. And we will begin sitting from January the 1st next year until the end of 2021. And we intend to use our position on the Security Council to address the security consequences of climate change and land degradation. The trilogy of international conventions focusing respectively on biodiversity, land degradation, and climate change ought always to be viewed as an integrated whole, since each is inextricably connected with the others. And since we want to make this conference epoch-making, and path breaking, we have to be truthful and honest. We have to accept that much of the international community is too often considered UNCCD, despite its seminal importance, as a kind of proverbial unwanted offspring without legitimate paternity and undeserving of proper maintenance. You know, when we create our children, when we make them, the old distinction as to whether you're born in wedlock and out of wedlock no longer exists. But we have created UNCCD, and we don't quite treat it as legitimate, and we don't quite help it to be properly maintained so that it can survive and develop and carry out its mandate. We don't do that to our children. I don't think we should do that to the UNCCD. But despite the fact that the UNCCD has been treated in less than a wholesome manner, the truth is that land and its protection from rapacious degradation constitute the core upon which rest the life-sustaining pillars of water, food, forests, shelter, clothing, and energy. So that let us bring UNCCD to the center stage. It is not a sideshow. It is the fulcrum of humanity's main event. The recent global controversy regarding the veritable fires of Babylon in the Amazon is a poignant reminder of the importance of our land and our forests. So land in its bewildering complexities go hand in hand with biodiversity and climate change. Thus, more than ever, the voices of the international community must ring out loud with the necessity and desirability of land degradation neutrality, its targets and measures. We have accepted these. Enwrapped in all this are the vital issues touching and concerning poverty, infrastructural development, bushfires, deforestation, unsustainable agricultural practices, coastal erosion, pollution, natural disasters, the efficacious application of science and technology, capacity building and education, and a robust legislative and regulatory framework. All of these things demand substantial resource allocations. Look, they're not going to come from countries which can barely feed their populations. Their resources have to come from countries which have the more developed economies, which have a history of relationship with poorer countries. And the resources, if we are serious with what we agreed upon, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted in September 2015 at the General Assembly of the United Nations, it is agreed that we must have a partnership. And if we're going to have a partnership, we can't seriously expect that those who, for a variety of historical reasons, are impoverished, that they're the ones who must bear the greater burden, when in fact they have already suffered through colonialism, through imperialism. People don't like to hear these words, but we have to be honest and truthful with one another. If we're going to have not a confrontation, but a conversation as to what is necessary and desirable. So, we need substantial resources. We don't want to hear the pledges when those who make the pledges do not really mean them. And it's a case of taking the fool a little further by having us believe that those pledges are real when they are in fact a mirage. This is one earth that we have. Look, what happens in North Africa affects migration and security issues in Europe. It is in everybody's interest that these matters be efficaciously addressed. There is nowhere else for us to hide. Of course, in this partnership, it is also a responsibility in the less developed countries to mainstream land and land development into the overall development, sustainable development processes, so that we don't get a free pass. We have our own obligations and our own responsibilities. It is an often mistakenly held belief, in fact a serious misconception, that the UNCCD has little or nothing to do with small island developing states, because deserts are the province of continental Africa and Asia, but not of the islands, for example, in the Caribbean and the Pacific. The truth is that land degradation and drought affect all and sundry places. We have heard the examples given by Amina. We have heard them by Ibrahim. We have heard from the minister, the distinguished minister from India. Look, Haiti is part of a Caribbean island, and it is a proverbial poster child for historical land degradation, which has led to much impoverishment of an extraordinary nation, the land of the heroic black Jacobins. But you know, many persons say that Haiti, they're responsible for all what is happening there themselves. But when you take into account that when the Haitian Revolution established the state of Haiti, defeated colonialism, slaves, the first successful slave rebellion in history, the departing colonial power, France, subsequently imposed reparations from the very slaves, the ex-slaves, for they having freed themselves. And they had to make those payments for over 100 years. Those are realities. And when you see Haiti, we have to make sure that the international agencies, the developed countries, and especially those who have a historic responsibility in relation to Haiti, seek to explore a genuine partnership for the correction of historic wrongs and for assisting us in developing a better future. Additional to the host of factors, natural and man-made, which have historically degraded the land in the Caribbean islands, there is currently the challenge of the annual appearance in our seas and on our beaches of the sargassum seaweed, which threatens to despoil our lands and suffocate our tourism. This threat demands the urgent attention of UNCCD and its Secretariat. This matter has to be put at the international level, the issue of the sargassum seaweed. Much of the land degradation in small island developing states is directly related to and caused by climate change. And we know the issues: global warming, the rise of the level of the sea, the battering of the coastal areas, the damage to our rivers and their banks, landslides and deforestation, horrendous hurricanes and storms of increasing frequency and ferocity. They're all connected with climate change, to which our SIDS contribute little or nothing. In domestic law, if you have a nuisance which comes from your land onto my land, and it could be a nuisance by noise, by water, it could be any fact which constitutes a nuisance in law. You have to pay for the loss and damage which I suffer. In this world, the situation is really cockeyed. We don't contribute anything of any significance at all to climate change. You do all what you want to do. I'm talking about developed economies, cause damage to us, and then all you want to do is to provide SOPs. I am advising, not in any confrontational manner, that all of us have to work together at this. Otherwise, we are going to come to grief. We have seen it happen before, and it's going to happen on a much larger scale. We must not allow short-sighted leaders of powerful countries not to recognize the truth of what I'm speaking here today in New Delhi. Two years ago, hurricanes and storms lashed Dominica and Barbuda, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, St. Martin's, and Anguilla. This year, there is a destruction and tremendous loss of lives on two islands in the archipelagic state of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Immediate support is required urgently to the people of the Bahamas for relief, recovery, and reconstruction. I want this message to ring out loudly at COP14. A lot of people are dead, and these two islands have to start from scratch. We in CARICOM are actively in solidarity with the Bahamas, but without substantial extra regional support, the people of the Bahamas are going to take a long, long time to recover. Our islands cannot truly survive if global warming exceeds 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And we are on course for much more than that. These are perilous times. A succession of leaders of religion, politics, science, business, and public administration have wisely advised over the recent decades, particularly since the Rio Summit of 1992, that the unsustainable extraction of resources from our lands and seas by a rapacious economic system hell-bent on private accumulation and profit, without regard for humanity as a whole, cannot continue. Yet, the international community seems relatively powerless to contain this unwholesome and unsustainable extraction of resources. Look, we got to be serious. We just can't take the pious statements anymore. Meaningful corrective action is required. You know it and I know it, for humanity's survival and sustainable development. I don't believe for 1 minute when I hear people tell me that this or that leader of a big country, or this or that big country, that they don't understand the science of climate change. I don't believe it for 1 moment. They know the science. But they're thinking that if they have another 20 or 30 years, for instance, of fossil fuel, they can strengthen and deepen their hegemony over the world. I don't want you to give anybody a pass to tell them that they don't understand, because it's so simple to understand. It is their interests, their economic interests, which runs counter to their internalizing and understanding of the basic science in this matter. Today, our world faces a bundle of interlocking challenges to be urgently and satisfactorily addressed. Climate change, land degradation, and their consequences. Scarcity of vital resources such as water, energy, and strategic minerals. The growing inequality in the distribution of the Earth's resources. The constant threats to world peace and security. The advances in artificial intelligence and their socio-economic impact. The aging of the world's population. The organization of the global economic system. The governance arrangements in individual nation states. The growing threat of nativism and unilateralism. And the ongoing quest for among right-thinking persons for a necessary and desirable multilateralism. That's why we are here. The issues before us today, I reiterate, have assumed unusual and unprecedented seriousness. And they are thus urgent. They're existential to our lives, our living and production. And despite the awesome nature of the challenges, we cannot afford to be pessimistic. There is nowhere to go. We are on Earth. These are not times for lamentations. Therefore, optimism, clear thinking, and concerted action. And I say, all the factors have come together to help us to have such a distinguished leader as Prime Minister Modi, to help us in leading this charge. I thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your very passionate and empathetic message, and a message that we all own the responsibility and need to walk the talk in all sincerity and honesty. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I take the distinct honor of requesting our Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, to kindly address this august gathering. A man with a vision and a man on a mission towards creating a beautiful, sustainable planet.
My friend Prime Minister Rav Gonsalves, Srimati Amina ji, Ibrahim Chiao, my minister colleague Prakash Javadekar, Babul Supriyo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to India for the 14th session of the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. I thank the Executive Secretary, Mr. Ibrahim Chiao, for having brought this convention to India. The record registration of this program reflects the global commitment to the task of reversing land degradation. India also looks forward to making an effective contribution as we take over the co-presidency for our 2-year term. Friends, for ages, we in India have always given importance to land. In Indian culture, the earth is held as sacred and treated as a mother. While getting up in morning, when we touch the earth with our feet, we seek forgiveness of Mother Earth by praying Samudravasane Devi Parvatastana Mandale Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Padasparsam Kshamaswame. Friends, climate and environment impact both biodiversity and land. It is widely accepted that the world is facing the negative impact of climate change. This is seen in a loss of land and plants and animal species facing threats of becoming extinct. Climate change is also leading to land degradation of various kinds, be it due to rise in sea levels and wave action, erratic rainfall and storms, and sandstorms caused by hot temperatures. Ladies and gentlemen, India has hosted global gathering through the COP for all the 3 conventions. This reflects our commitment to addressing all the 3 main concerns of the Rio Convention. Going forward, India would be happy to propose initiatives for greater South-South cooperation in addressing issue of climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation. Friends, you will be shocked to know that desertification affects over 2/3 of the countries of the world. This makes a compelling case for action on land front. Combine this with the water crisis facing the world. Because when we address degraded lands, we also address water scarcity. Augmenting water supply, enhancing water recharge, slowing down water runoff, and retaining moisture in the soil are all parts of a holistic land and water strategy. I call upon the leadership of UNCCD to create a global water action agenda which is central to the land degradation neutrality strategy. Friends, restoring the health of land is critical for sustainable development. Today, I reminded of India's NDCs that were submitted at the Paris COP at the UNFCCC. It highlighted India's deep cultural roots of maintaining a healthy balance between land, water, air, trees, and all living beings. Friends, it would make you happy that India has been able to increase its tree cover. Between 2015 to 2017, India's tree and forest cover has been increased by 0.8 million hectares. In India, any diversion of forest land for development purposes has to be compensated by making an equivalent land mass available for afforestation. It is also required a monetary payment of the value of timber which such forest land would have yield. I'm happy to share that only last week, funds amounting to nearly $6 billion means 40 to 50,000 crore rupees have been released to the provincial governments in lieu of such diversion for development of forest lands. My government had launched a program to double the income of farmers by increasing crop yield through various measures. This includes land restoration and micro irrigation. We are working with the motto of per drop, more crop. At the same time, we are also focusing on zero budget natural farming. We have also introduced a scheme to determine the soil quality of each of the farms and are issuing soil health cards to farmers. This enables them to grow right type of crops, fertilizers, and use the right quantity of water. So far, about 200 and 17 million soil health cards have been distributed. We are increasing the use of biofertilizers and reducing the use of pesticides and chemical fertilizers. Water management is another important issue addressed LDN. We have created Jal Shakti Ministry to address all water-related important issues in totality. Recognizing the value of water in all forms, we enforce zero liquid discharge in many industrial processes. The regulatory regime provides for treatment of wastewater to a degree that it can be put back into the river system without harming life in water. Friends, I would like to draw your attention to another form of land degradation, which if not prevented, would be impossible to reverse. This is the menace of plastic waste. Apart from having adverse health implications, this is going to render lands unproductive and unfit for agriculture. My government has announced that India will put an end to single-use plastic in the coming years. We are committed to development of environment-friendly substitutes and also an efficient plastic collection and disposal method. I believe the time has come for even the world to say goodbye to single-use plastic. Friends, human empowerment is closely linked to the state of the environment. Be it harnessing water resources or reducing usage of single-use plastic, the way ahead is behavioral change. It is only when all sections of society decide to achieve something we can see the desired results. We may introduce any number of frameworks, but real change will be powered by teamwork on the ground. India saw this in the case of the Swachh Bharat mission. People from all walks of life took part and ensured sanitation coverage was up from 38% in 2014 to 99% today. I am seeing the same spirit when it comes to ensuring the end of single-use plastic. Youngsters in particular are most supportive and are taking the lead to bring positive change. The media is also playing a very valuable role. Friends, I would like to make further commitment to the global land agenda. I also offer India's support to those countries who may like to understand and adopt some of the LDN strategies that have succeeded in India. From this forum, I would like to announce that India would raise its ambition of the total area that would be restored from its land degradation status from 21 million hectares to 26 million hectares between now and 2030. This will support India's large commitment to achieve an additional carbon sink between 2.5 billion metric tons to 3 billion metric tons through tree cover. We in India take pride in using remote sensing and space technology for multiple applications, including land restoration. India would be happy to help other friendly countries develop land restoration strategies through cost-effective satellite and space technology. In order to further develop a scientific approach and facilitate induction of technology to land degradation issues, we have decided to set up a Center for Excellence in India at the Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education. This agency will actively engage to promote South-South cooperation with those who may wish to access knowledge, technology, and training of manpower to address land degradation related issues. Friends, I understand that an ambitious New Delhi Declaration is being considered. We are all aware that the Sustainable Development Goals have to be achieved by 2030, of which attainment of L&D is also a part. I wish you well as you deliberate further towards proposing a global strategy for land degradation neutrality. I would end by saying a very popular prayer from one of our oldest scriptures. Om Dayoho Shantihi, Antariksham Shantihi. The word Shanti does not only refer to peace or the antidote to violence. Here, it refers to prospering. Everything has a law of being, a purpose, and everybody has to fulfill that purpose. The fulfillment of that purpose is prosperity. Om Dayoho Shantihi, Antriksha Shantihi. So, it says, may the skies, heaven and space prosper. Prithvihi Shantihi, Apaha Shantihi, Aushadaya Shantihi, Manaspataya Shantihi, Vishve Devaha Shantihi, Brahma Shantihi. May Mother Earth prosper. This includes the flora and fauna with whom we share our planet. May they prosper. May every drop of water prosper. May the divine gods prosper. Sharva Shantihi, Shantireva Shantihi, Same Shantiredahi. May everybody prosper. May I also be blessed with prosperity. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Om prosperity, prosperity is prosperity. The thought and philosophy of our ancestors was all embracing and filled with a great thought. They realized the true relationship between me and we. They knew that prosperity of me can only be through prosperity of we. When our ancestors said we, they did not just mean their family or community or even just humans. It includes the sky, water, plants, trees, everything. It is also very important to know the order in which they are praying for peace and prosperity. They pray for the sky, the earth, the water, the plants. These are things that sustain us. This is what we call the environment. If this prosper, then I prosper. This was their mantra. Even today, this is an extremely relevant thought. With this spirit, I once again congratulate you for taking part in this summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, sir, for your very beautiful thoughts and message wishing the prosperity of all individuals, of all life on earth. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for guiding us. Thank you very much for your very inspiring and motivating